Well, good morning. My name is Wendy. If I haven't had a chance to meet you yet, this is really short. I want to give a shout out in a good way to our folks in the back booth because, we don't acknowledge all the time those behind the scenes, especially that work back in the AV booth. But this morning, they've had a time. It's been a struggle with some things. And I was joking. I was like, things can work like last Sunday pretty flawlessly. And nobody can touch any of the machines, like in the summertime, for like 7 days. And then this morning you turn them on, and they're just not feeling it. They're just not doing what they're supposed to do or what they normally do. And so they've been working hard this morning to get a bunch of things fixed and working not just here, but on the stream and a bunch of, one of the cameras wasn't working and all kinds of stuff. So I just want to say thank you guys in the back and those of you that aren't working this week that work other weeks. And sometimes, we're sitting in the audience and we might be wondering like, why is the words not up on the screen, or why is this not happening? And, a lot of times it's not the people in the back's fault. It's technology. We love it. And at the same time, it doesn't always love us back the way we want. So thank you guys for that. And I blitzed in here this morning like about 5 minutes before 10. I smell like campfire smoke, so I apologize in advance if you're near me. I didn't even brush my hair because my hairbrush is in the bottom of my bag. I was camping last night with our American Heritage Girls troop that NLCF charters. We had 12 girls and 7 adults out there. I don't know if, I have a couple pictures, but I don't know if any of them, I don't know if it's working. So if we do, no, anyway. So we were camping at Camp Altamans overnight for a one-night camp out, and I left early to come here. But we did campfire French toast this morning because the meals were planned by a couple of our older girls. And so campfire French toast, so we had these foil packs on the thing, but you had to lean over the fire to like flip them over and around. And so it was pretty smoky, and I'm pretty smoky. So I hopped in the car and was heading here, and there's no cell service like at the campsite where I was, and so I got back on the road, and then my phone started like buzzing with all these messages, and I started to see my GroupMe chat for the 1521 AV thread, and it was like just blitzing with messages, and I was like, uh-oh, something's happening at the church. I wouldn't be able to fix it anyway, so it wouldn't have helped for me to be here earlier, but we had a good time overnight. Now, we were at this campsite last year, and there was a torrential rainstorm, and they had a wooden bridge to cross to the group site, because to get to the bathroom, you have to cross a wooden bridge over a creek. And last year, we had this torrential downpour, and the water was coming over the wooden bridge, and so we were having to walk all the girls through. So that's what it looks like. But this year, so the wooden bridge apparently, I don't know, they took out the wooden bridge. We're not sure why, because we saw it sitting on the side. But the wooden bridge they took out, but they didn't put in the new bridge they told us they were going to put in by this point. And so one of our leaders went and saw it a week ago, and there were these nice stepping stones across there. And then we got there yesterday, and do you notice there's no stepping stones across there? So our campsite's back there, but to get to where the bathrooms are and the cars are, it's across that water, which is pretty cold. So anyway, we were traipsing back across that last night and this morning to go to the bathroom. And so, yeah, that was fun. But we did it. We had a great time, and they should be packing up and cleaning up right now. I got out of that duty by having to come preach. So, but it was a good time. And there's a couple other pictures. I think I put one up there of the foil pack, so you could kind of see the smokiness that we were. That's Dom Saya's hand. You could tell by the Eagles sweatshirt that he wears all the time, usually on Sundays. So anyway, that was what we were cooking. But it worked great, and we had a good time. So my feet were soaking wet when I got here, so I put on dry shoes and I put on clean clothes. But I did not brush my hair. So that's where we are this morning. But it's great to be here and starting a new series today. I'm excited. For the month of June, we are doing a series called Behold. and it's exploring God through the lens of terrain. Now, terrain, most of us, we know what that word means, but, for funsies, I looked it up in Merriam-Webster to see what it said, and it said the physical characteristics of a geographical tract of land. So that was the definition of terrain. It's basically what are the physical characteristics of the land around us, and this is different types of terrain. And so we're going to be practicing one of our 3 B's, right? So last week, Robbie reminded us of these 3 B's that we have, that we hold here in NLCF, these values that we carry that help us along in our mission. Behold, be built, and be sent. And behold, this idea of beholding God, being aware of him and who he is around us, right? When we sit in his presence and we worship him, we gaze upon him, we get to know him and his character. These are all things that have to do with beholding God. And so we thought, we talk about this, that we value beholding. What if we spent a month and we did it together on Sunday mornings? And so this series that we're going to do these next 4 weeks here in June are all about, we're going to behold together. And we're going to do this through what we're calling the lens of terrain. Now, we were thinking about how, in the summertime, a lot of times people take trips. They travel, they may explore things that they haven't seen before, or they may go to familiar places that they love that are different from where they live each and every day, right? People spend a lot of times outdoors, relaxing, just kind of just spending time in nature and getting to know the natural world. These kind of summertime activities and kind of hobbies, gave us the idea of what if we kind of overlap that with this idea of beholding, and what would it look like if we took time to kind of think about some different parts of creation or different types of terrain, and we said, what do these things tell us about God and who he is? One of the most amazing things to me about creation is that it's so vast and so diverse, right? There's so much beauty in the world, and yet there are things that might seem in opposition, and both can be beautiful. So we can stand on the beach and we can stare at the ocean, and you can picture the damp breeze blowing, as you watch the sunrise over the horizon of the ocean. And you can also stand in the Rocky Mountains where it's cold and see these snow-capped peaks that seem like they're touching heaven because they're so tall. And that's beautiful. And then you can stand in the vast sand-covered desert and you just look, in what seems like for miles there's no end to the sky and the sand, and there's these different maybe colors, but it's all kind of in the same range, and it's reds and oranges and yellows and maybe a little bit of blue and gray mixed in, but it looks nothing like the lush green tropical rainforest, and yet both of those can be beautiful. And then, of course, there's the created world that humans have begun to engage in, right? We see even early in the book of Genesis where shortly after Adam and Eve, you have humans begin to create cities. And we know that over time, as humans developed these cities, they began to express their God-given gifts through architecture and urban landscapes. And a lot of times architecture has these pieces of it that point back to people's understanding of or their connection to God and the created world. And so all of these things are pieces of terrain. And so we decided for June, hey, we're going to camp in this for a month. And so today I'm going to be starting off the series, and I'm going to talk about oceans. And then next week, Christian is going to talk about desert and sky. And then the following week, Steve is going to explore mountains and valleys. And then Jenny's going to wrap us up with kind of the urban landscapes of cities. And each week, what we're going to do is we're going to highlight one or two attributes of God, pieces of God's character that we kind of connect with this particular type of terrain. And as we do that, we're going to behold God together. We're going to just look at who he is and what we can see about him and what that means for us. Christian came across a quote that he shared with our teaching team this past week, and I want to start off with it today. It says, "Geography is simply a visible form of theology." And this is by a Hebrew scholar, John Levinson, and I want you to let that sit with you for a moment while I also read this quote from an author who wrote an article on landscape theology that I was reading. He says, "Landscapes shape our beliefs, our bodies, and our minds. They also enable, inspire, and constrain much of our activities. We are literally moved by them, and landscape elements such as trees, rivers, mountains, and fields attract us to their surfaces as they shape entire societies." Landscapes present this perfect place for us to practice beholding God, to explore who he is. And so, as I said, we're going to kind of dive in each week to one or maybe two attributes, right? Attributes is a fancy word for characteristic, something that describes God in some way or helps us get to know his character. Now, over the course of these 4 weeks, we're just going to have a chance to touch on a few attributes of God. There are so many, but as we do, it just helps us grow in our faith. It helps us to personally connect with God. It helps us to know this God that we love and whom we are following with our lives, whom we trust and surrender ourselves to. So, as I said, today we're going to start with ocean. So I want you to think for a minute about ocean, and maybe we can put up an ocean picture. I have a bunch of photos in the PowerPoint. I forgot to tell not PowerPoint, the Pro Presenter bundle. I forgot to mention this. There's no set time for those slides. So the words you can put on the screen, but when I'm not saying words, just pick a pretty ocean image and you can put it up there. I put like 10 because the goal is just for you to kind of sit in it. So we'll start with one. But I want you guys to take a minute, think about the ocean, and then just call out some things. When you think about the ocean, and you don't have to get super deep here, but what comes to mind when you hear ocean or you think about the beach and the ocean? Like, what do you think of? What does ocean bring to mind for you? Waves. Vastness, yeah. Calmness, powerful. There was something else I missed. Calmness, powerful, something else. Repetitive, yes, like that. Peace? Changes, yeah. Depth, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like when we think about the ocean, a lot of us, like, it brings something to mind, right? Like if you close your mind, even if you close your eyes, not close your mind, keep your mind open. I didn't get much sleep, y'all. And it was about an hour into the night, and the other leader in the tent with me, I said, "Are we laying downhill?" She's like, "Yeah, I think we are." Because I had gotten there late and not helped set up the location of our tent. So we like flipped ourselves because I realized, I think the blood is rushing to my head. Anyway, so it was a long night. So keep your minds open, but if you were to close your eyes and think about the ocean, like, can't you take yourself there? Like you can kind of see it and hear it. You can almost taste it. Like if you visit a beach a lot on, the ocean with salt water, you can like taste that saltiness kind of, can't you? And even if you've just seen pictures of the ocean, if you haven't spent much time there, you can still, like you have a picture that comes to mind. And so I think that's helpful for us because it gives us a small thing to hold on to as we then think about, how does the ocean help us behold God and his character? So we're going to use two kind of fancy words today in our. They're not really fancy, but sometimes we'll use these words to describe God's attributes, and we're going to use infinite and immutable. Now, I'll get to those definitions in a minute, but what better way, right, to start this whole series off than with the ocean in week 1, because the ocean is very big and vast, as was mentioned by you guys. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, 71% of the Earth's surface is water. I asked this question this morning with our AHG troop and our little devotional that I did before I left. I said, how much of the earth do you think is water? And one of the girls was like, they were all yelling at numbers. She's like, 71. And some other people yelling numbers. She's like, 71. And I was like, well, you keep saying 71. It's like, you're right. It's 71. I don't know if they learned that in school or if it was on a recent SOL question. I think she's a 4th grader. But she knew 71% of the earth's surface is covered by water. And of that 71%, 96.5% of that are oceans. So the earth is 71% water. That means less than 4% of that water is your rivers, lakes, streams, ponds, all that stuff. Most of that is ocean. And if that doesn't blow your mind, this statistic might, because it blew mine. In all of that, experts estimate that of the ocean waters, only 5% have been explored and chartered by humans. That means 95% of those oceans, so 95% of the 96.5% of the 71% of the Earth's surface has been explored by humans. The rest is unexplored. 95% is unexplored, unchartered, unseen by our eyes, by our cameras, by all of that stuff. So the majority of the oceans are unknown. And I thought, man, if that doesn't make me think about God, I don't know what does, right? Because God's infiniteness, so we can put up the definition for infinite, right? We know infinite means God has no beginning and no end. He has always existed and he always will. This is why God declared his name to be I am, because God is. He has no size, and there's no place that can contain God because God has no limits of any kind. There's no way to measure God, for everything that God is limitless. God's power has no limits. His knowledge has no limits. His love has no limits. And we know that God, the Father, Son, and Spirit are all the same. They are infinite. Now, the ocean isn't actually infinite, but it feels like it sometimes, doesn't it? I mean, if you've ever been on a boat or a ship in the middle of the ocean, or if you've ever been on a plane over an ocean, so I wore a Maui shirt today because if you've ever had the privilege of flying to Hawaii and visiting those islands, you know there's a long period of time, and the same if you're flying anywhere on a different continent, you're over the water, and no matter what side of the plane you look out, like you just see water. And the same as if you're ever out on a cruise ship, or even if you're out on a boat like in the ocean and you go like deep sea fishing or something, you get to a place where you can't see anything around you but water. And so it feels like it goes on forever. It feels so limitless. And in the same way, when you're in water, and you're in especially water with a lot of waves, you feel like it's so powerful. Like the water can take you under, and we know it can, right? You have to be careful in certain parts of the ocean because the water can grab you and just take you under. But when you're under the water, you know, when you get to a place and it's deep, you know that you can't see its depths, right? You can't see the bottom. You have no idea where it is. And so sometimes when you're exploring in the ocean, like it's so real because it's with you, it's on you, it's around you. It surrounds you, and yet you know that it goes on more than your mind can even imagine. And it blows our mind, doesn't it? In a way, like it's too much to kind of comprehend. And yet it's so enjoyable, isn't it? Like just to sit there in the water sometimes and to enjoy it and to play with it, you know. And when you go into certain parts of the water and it's calmer and it's more clear and you can see more because it's shallow and you can see these beautiful fish and these, you know, swimming around and these beautiful plants and the colors that are there, and it's very it's peaceful. It's just it's restful. And so we enjoy it. We enjoy playing in the water and in the ocean. And these are things that I think help us kind of think about our experience with God. Like God surrounds us in these ways, and He's constant. You know, that was one of the things that you guys mentioned. Like, you know, He's always there, and His presence is there. And He's enjoyable, yet we realize when we stop to think about it, our minds are blown because what we know about God barely scratches the surface about who God is. The Apostle Paul wrote about the vastness of God's love quite a bit in his letter to the Ephesians. So I wanted to share a couple verses from Ephesians that make me think of God's infinite nature. First, in chapter 2, verses 4 and 5, Paul writes, "But because of His great love for us, God, who is rich in mercy, made us alive with Christ." And then he describes that love in the next chapter, in chapter 3. We're picking up in verse 17. He writes, "And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power together with all the Lord's holy people to grasp how wide and how long and how high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God." How wide and deep, right? How long, how high, all of those words, don't they make you think of the ocean? These words that describe this almost limitless experience. And it allows us to think about this deep experience of God's limitless love. You know, that's why there's some worship songs, right? There's one called Oceans. But there are these songs that talk about God's love being like an ocean. And I think the reason that metaphor of God's love being like an ocean has been made many times is because of the way the ocean surrounds us and fills us and how it makes us feel, and because it makes us feel like it's limitless, it's infinite. But the cool thing is that the ocean isn't just big, as you guys noted, it's also, it's constant in a way, right? We talked about the waves. The other attribute that I want to highlight this morning is that second I word, and it's immutable. Immutable just simply means God does not change, right? We can always count on Him to be holy, to be good. We can count on God to always be faithful, to always love us, to always oppose sin. God's word is equally unchanging like Him. It does not change. And therefore we can count on God's words. We can count on His promises. Because His word never changes, we can always trust Him. So when we think about the ocean and we think about the waves coming in, we think about the tides and the rhythm that it brings. You know, the water is always moving in one direction or the other. It's always the tide is coming in the ocean or the tide is going out, but it's never just sitting there. If you have a body of water that just sits there, you get the Dead Sea. It doesn't move. But the oceans are not like that. They are constantly moving. And so even one of the things that was said is it's changing. So the ocean is changing in a sense that it's always moving and there are variables. And yet at the same time that it feels like it's changing and moving, it is consistent. It's reliable. The tide is coming in. The tide is going out. You can look up a tide chart and it will tell you at this location, right? If you ever go to a beach and you look it up, you know, high tide's going to be at this point, low tide's going to be here, and there's a rhythm to that, and there's a predictability. And so in the same way that we know that it's constant and faithful to a degree, there is something about it that can be changing and moving. And in the same way, God is faithful, right? God is faithful to his word and to what he promises us in his scripture and his character. But in the same way, God can't be pinned down. He's always, in a way, moving. He's at work in ways sometimes that surprise us. But just because God surprises us in ways he's at work, or we learn something new about him, doesn't mean that he's not faithful. And so there are these things that we have to hold in tension, but we know that God is unchanging when we kind of use that broad term immutable, because his character doesn't change. Who he is does not change. There's a couple verses that I wanted to share kind of connected to this. The first comes from Malachi chapter 3, verse 6, where God himself says to the people through the prophet, I, the Lord, do not change. And along with it comes this promise. So you, the descendants of Jacob, are not destroyed. Anytime you're looking in any of the prophets, but especially the minor prophets, you see there's always a pattern in these books where it starts off with like, so you've broken my covenant, and this is the kind of the penalty for that, because you've broken my covenant and you're my people. But here's the hope that I'm bringing. And so in that we have God reminding the people, I don't change, and because I don't change, my words, I'm faithful to my words. So you're not going to be fully destroyed, descendants of Jacob, right? This remnant that he's left, because now that doesn't mean that they didn't experience all kinds of things that were consequences for their behavior and the way that they abandoned God, but there's a constancy to him that he keeps. And we see this in many of the minor prophets. We see this part where God keeps going back to, you know what, this is what I said and you broke this, but I am who I am and I don't change. And the author of Hebrews says something very similar about Jesus. In Hebrews chapter 13, verse 8, you might have heard this verse before. It's such a good one. And it's so simple. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. It's a reminder that the Father, the Son, the Spirit, they don't change. They are constant. And just like the waves crash on the beach like clockwork each and every day, God himself, he is dependable. He's reliable. He's consistent. He's immutable. He does not change. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And friends, this is good news. This is when we sit and we think about this and we behold him like this, we worship him. Because we worship this God whose love for us is bigger than the ocean, and everything about him, his goodness, his power, his compassion, his knowledge, it's more infinite than we can imagine. We've barely scratched the surface to the depths of all of those things. And at the same time, this infinite God, his character does not change. He is faithful. He cannot not be faithful because his promises will always come true and his words can never fail. And this God, he loves you and he loves me. And he wants to be in relationship with us. He wants to commune with us. He wants us to see him and experience him. He wants us to behold him and to adore him and to worship him. And he wants us to rest in the same way as one might float in the ocean. If you've ever done that and you've been out in the waters where the waves are coming in, but they're not super strong, and you allow yourself to just kind of float and move with the water. If you're not careful and you close your eyes, you'll drift pretty far down from where you started sometimes, you have to figure out where on the beach you came from, right? Where's my people? They're way back there. But if you just let yourself do that, right, it's so restful because you can feel this movement and it's peaceful. One of the most peaceful moments I ever had was in water. It wasn't an ocean, it was a lake, but I was very pregnant with our first child. It was the summertime. It was very hot. And I was, I think, just about 9 months pregnant, and we were with friends for a weekend at a lake house that they have at Smith Mountain Lake. And I'm a stomach sleeper. And if you're a stomach sleeper and you're pregnant, that's at odds with each other, because you get to a point where you can't sleep on your stomach because you just can't. And so I was not getting good rest or sleep because I was always restless. And so we're at the water and it's hot, and I'm down there, and they had a float that's one of those with a mesh bottom, and it's got like the outside edge, and so you can kind of sit on it and just sit down in the water. And it's like the Lord he knew, and he just gave me this idea. You could lay on that in your stomach, right? So I said, I need a nap. So I laid on my stomach where that mesh bottom just came underneath, and I laid there in the water like this, and I asked David to tether me to the dock. So he tied a rope on my arm and tethered me to the dock, and I took an hour nap, and it was the best hour nap of my life. And the water was, I will say it was wet. Some of you might be in that debate where is it wet, really a thing, liquid wetness. I'm not going to go there right now, but some of you know what I'm talking about. But it was just cool because I was hot and I was in the water and I was fully surrounded, and it was amazing. The best rest probably of my life that 1 hour. It was in water, not the ocean, but water. But you get the idea of just being encompassed by and relaxing. And God wants us to do that in his presence. He wants us to do that in his creation. He wants us to do that with each other because his characteristics, he wants us to live those out with each other, right? He wants us to be surrounded by his goodness and his mercy, his grace, his compassion, his kindness, and his love. And so this summer, the next time you see the ocean, whether it's in person yourself or a picture that somebody else might post on Facebook or Instagram, or while you're watching a TV show or a movie and you see the ocean, I want to invite you to think about God, behold him even more. Worship him with gratitude and love. Think about his infinite nature and his immutable, unchanging character. And thank him and worship him. Let's pray. God, we thank you for who you are and how you invite us to just learn more about you through your creation, God, through the natural world, God. And we know that it doesn't, it's not a perfect analogy or a metaphor to who you are, but it gives us a taste. Gives us a taste of something that we can wrap our minds around, because we can't wrap our minds around you, Jesus. But we know that there's something there. There's something there that will help us, God. And as we think about the ocean and we think about all of the depth that's never been explored, God, we know so much of you we don't know. Or at least we don't know yet. Maybe we will someday in eternity in the future. But right now we know the surface, but the surface is still so good. And we thank you and we worship you, and we ask you to continue to help us to get to know you more, to dive a little deeper in the ocean and in the waters, and to get to know your love more, to get to know your goodness more, to step into your compassion and your mercy, God, your justice and your truth. Even if we know that we can't know it all, help us to desire a little bit more. And God, we know you're faithful to reveal yourself to us. So would you continue to open our eyes and reveal more of yourself as we are more willing and available to behold. God, we love you and we praise you, and we pray this in your name. Amen.